If you've ever heard of the name monster in human form and you wondered what that really meant, Jamil Sule is a clear definition of monster in human form. The young man in the middle of the two men snuck into the house of a retired nurse in Makurdi, Benue State on Sunday the 14th of January 2024, went straight into the kitchen and brutally stabbed her adopted daughter, Mercy, before proceeding to stab the retired nurse, Mrs. Amali, after she caught him right in the act of stabbing her adopted daughter. When he was done stabbing the duo, he fled the house. Jamil Sule is from Ampa local government area of Kogi State and is said to have schooled in the Lafia Polytechnic of Nasarawa State. On the 9th of January 2024, Jamilu went to Mrs. Esther Amali's home, the retired nurse, to report her adopted daughter known as Mercy. According to Jamilu, he told Mrs. Esther that Mercy was fond of insulting him, and so he thought to report her to the mother so she could talk her out of doing that to him, as though it was a reasonable act. Mrs. Esther was said to have pleaded with Jamilu, and she even offered him a bottle of Coke. He drank the bottle of Coke and jokingly stated that she was trying to bribe him, right? And then he was said to have told her that he would be back. But I guess Mrs. Esther did not pay attention to that last statement that he made, "I will be back." She thought it was just a normal talk, and he left afterwards. What Mrs. Esther and Mercy didn't know, however, was that Jamilu had other brutal plans for them on the way. So on Sunday the 14th of January 2024, Jamilu was said to have snuck into Mrs. Esther's home. He went straight into the kitchen where Mercy was cooking. He picked a knife and brutally stabbed Mercy. Mrs. Esther heard Mercy screaming in the kitchen, and she ran into the kitchen to check what exactly was happening to Mercy. When she got into the kitchen, what she saw is better left unsaid. The very moment Jamilu noticed that Mrs. Esther had seen him in the act, he turned at her and also gruesomely stabbed her before taking to his heels. After he left their house, he was said to have fled Benue State in an attempt to evade justice. After Jamilu fled the crime scene, Mrs. Amali was said to have struggled out of the house, bleeding profusely and screaming, asking for help. Unfortunately, her 20-year-old adopted daughter, Mercy, had already died from the stab wounds. Mrs. Amali was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she couldn't survive the stab injuries. But she didn't die without telling the story of what actually happened to herself and her adopted daughter. She was said to have narrated to her son who the attacker was. She gave a vivid description. She said, "That Igala boy with swollen legs, he killed Mercy." She kept telling him, and they knew who the Igala boy was because she was also mentioning his name. I'm guessing that Jamilu thought he had killed Mrs. Amali before he fled the crime scene. But thankfully, she was alive to tell the story for the few minutes that she lived before passing away. The police was said to have launched a manhunt for the alleged killer of Mrs. Amali and Mercy. Jamilu's family was said to have fled their home for 2 days until the community asked the Igala people in the area to provide the father or there will be unrest. The father was said to have finally turned himself into the police station in Ampawad. He's still in police custody, but the police did not relent in their search for the prime suspect, being Jamilu Sule. Jamilu's pictures were flooded all over the internet for anyone with reasonable information to assist the police in finding him. And finally, the police were said to have traced Jamilu far away in Obajana in Kogi State, where they got him arrested. And today, the 1st of February 2024, a Benue State human rights activist posted the update on his Facebook page, saying that the police had finally arrested Jamilu. I guess this is some sort of good news coming through, and we are trusting the police that they would follow up even with the good work that they've already begun, that they would not relent but ensure that justice is served at the end of the day. This is a very sad story, and we pray that the soul of the deceased will rest in perfect peace. What do you think about this story? I would love to know your thoughts. Do you think that these killings could have been avoided if Mrs. Esther had reported to the police the very moment Jamilu began to make threats that he was going to deal with Esther? Because he was said to have made those threats that he was going to deal with her severely. But I guess people did not take those words seriously. More so, Mrs. Esther must have felt that since she pleaded with him, everything had passed. But it appears that some people are truly monsters in human forms. How do you go to that extent simply because someone insulted you? In the meantime, guys, take care of yourself, take care of your emotions, take care of your mental health. Be kind to yourself, be kind to the people around you, and always, always stay safe. I remain Dorcas Ige Olukun, and I love you guys.